Welcome back. We are discussing the proposed U.S. restrictions on the military aid to Pakistan. Mr. Chaudhary, how would you respond to the larger concerns in the region? Because, of course, that we are fighting this battle, but the Pakistani military would say, or the government even would say, that we cannot remain complacent as far as the threat from the eastern border is concerned. So, do you think that we should really say, okay, if the Americans are saying that these resources will not be diverted against India?
I think we're beating the wrong horse here, frankly speaking. I think we need to understand the context a little better. You see, the American support is coming in under two heads. One is the Coalition Support Fund, which is essentially the reimbursement of the expenditure that the Pakistani military has already made in the context of war on terror. So it is the bills that you sort of put up every quarterly or within a certain period, and you say this is the amount of money that we have spent, and there is of course a way of auditing those, and then that is what is reimbursed. That's called the Coalition Support Fund. The next is the foreign military finance. The foreign military finance, money coming into the foreign military finance is something that is given as a direct aid to the Pakistan military. Now the foreign military finance is the money that Pakistan is required to spend back with the US sources. You can source your additional requirements out of the foreign military fund from within the US. Now, as far as this money that is within the foreign military fund is concerned, is being given to us, is required for the sake of fighting counterterrorism, and that is the purpose of why the US is giving that money to us. So that should be very clear to our discussion. Second aspect, how does it impact the balance of power? It doesn't impact the balance of power at all, frankly speaking, not at all. Because of the fact that the Pakistan military is not entirely dependent upon, our entire military capability or capacity is not in play currently fighting this counter-insurgency.
But the message from the United States is very clear that, okay, we will provide you financing or the equipment to fight Al-Qaeda and Taliban, but as far as the threat from India is concerned, we will not provide you any assistance.
Like I said earlier, I gave a reference of two specific statements, one by General Musharraf, one something that has come out of our own political system in terms of the $12 billion. Now, in that, perhaps what General Musharraf was trying to say was that we have a large budget which comes in from, as per the requirements of the military from the government of Pakistan, and the Pakistani military has, it could be well out of the Coalition Support Fund for all it is for all it is concerned. The reason is because we are already spending money out of it. It is out of our budgetary resources. So the Pakistani military is free to spend that amount of money which comes out of their own budget wherever they feel like. Now, the Indians took upon this particular aspect and made a lot of hue and cry about it, that why was it that the American money was being spent on developing bunkers in Kashmir? Now, entirely that was hogwash, frankly speaking. It had absolutely no place in terms of the argument and in terms of the logic. The fact that we need to keep in mind is it does not make even a bit of a difference as far as the balance of power is concerned. If at all the United States is concerned, it must ensure that within the conventional forces, the balance of power is such that it must ensure stability within South Asia and does not let anything go adversely against the requirements of a long-term.
But is it really practical if the Americans are saying that the intended assistance or the equipment that they are providing should be used to fight Al-Qaeda and Taliban? Is it really practical that, suppose that if there is threat from India, that Pakistan military will not use it? Maria?
I think, Kamran, it's highly improbable and it's very impractical to put such kind of limits, because one, you cannot monitor it. Number two, it is impossible to see that. And I'll just put another counter question. I think the biggest question is this: how do you deal with the Indian presence in Afghanistan? If, for example, the regional balance of power is also extended into Afghanistan, and you have a different situation in which the regional rivalry no longer remains between India and Pakistan on the eastern front, but also gets involved into the western front. So does that also mean that that is also going to define a regional balance of power? I think at the core of it is always going to be the problem of defining Pakistan's national security and military objectives. And once we are doing that, we will have to cater for the fact that it is a fluid situation in which security concerns always differ and varied. And it could have been fine if India was only on the eastern front. They could have been perhaps, what Mr. Chaudhary is saying, that perhaps we could see whether we have made the bunkers or not. But when you're fighting something, you have to start building the base from the core. You cannot have the center weak and only give equipment. entire infrastructure has to be built.
But Senator Bob Croker, who is one of the co-author of this step, he said, let me quote here, that this provision simply ensures that American people's tax dollars are being used for their intended purpose. Do you think that they have a genuine concerns that they are providing this financial assistance to fight Al-Qaeda and Taliban, and they believe that fighting Al-Qaeda and Taliban are also in their interest?
Well, number one, this is absolutely essential that they ensure that the money is used for fighting Al-Qaeda and Taliban. I think we should just keep in mind that the US has never ever given Pakistan military assistance to fight against India. And Indians always ensured that, and Americans themselves assured Indians that they will never give assistance to Pakistan to enable Pakistan to be able to use that equipment against India. Given that situation, I think we should differentiate between political influence and military assistance. Political influence, one is a country is free to exert anywhere. We can have good political relations with Iran or bad political relations with Iran, and vice versa with China or with Afghanistan. I think American concern at the moment is that, number one, the aid is used only for fighting against Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Number two, that actually this aid binds Pakistan into taking action against these elements. The point is that there is a concern among American policy makers that Pakistan may be taking only some superficial actions against some sections and keeping aside other sections and not actually taking actions against them. There is this concern. It has been expressed in several different ways, and they would like to bind Pakistan into actually making full determination to taking action against these people. That, I guess, is...
So there is still big trust deficit between Pakistan and the United States.
Oh, I'm sure. I think that is a very correct statement. The trust deficit continues to exist, and Pakistan has not done much to remove that trust deficit. In this particular case, I mean there are various different situations. For example, the outside world doesn't understand why Pakistan is so lenient with a group like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jamaat-ud-Dawa, whatever name it comes with. Nobody understands. They know that in Pakistani cities, the people who are blowing themselves up and taking up taking up actions belong to something called Punjabi Taliban. They are not Afghani Taliban. They are not Taliban from the frontier, the FATA region. They are actually from various cities of Pakistan, and they are the ones who have
So Pakistan should be blamed if there is trust deficit between Pakistan and the United States.
Pakistan will need to assure. I mean, this is actually the onus is on Pakistan to assure others that you have.
Not at all. Let me say. I think Pakistan has done far beyond its capacity to take on a threat which is essentially considered as a global threat. You know, we should look at the fact that in the last 8 years, how many operations of the type that the Malakand Swat operation, for example, or for that matter the Waziristan operation, have been conducted within Afghanistan, where the real war is expected to have taken place, where you have 100,000 NATO and US forces lined up for about last 8 years? Not a single. I think if you can identify, perhaps Helmand was one tiny operation that was conducted for about 3,000 to 4,000 Marines. Where do you have 30,000 troops of any country, or for that matter within Afghanistan or Pakistan, engaging the Taliban, a threat that very much obviously is a problem for Pakistan, as well as perhaps will have implications as far as the global threat is concerned. So I don't find that Pakistan needs to work harder on the, yes, we need to negotiate, we need to engage to assure our allies that, you know, Pakistan is doing much more than with its capacity. I think the amount of beating that we have taken as people, as a society, goes to prove what we have done in this particular war on terror. I think
we will continue our discussion on this point as well, but before that we have to go for another break here. After the break our discussion will continue. Keep watching In Focus.